We're going to get started with our Google Hangout. Thank you everyone for coming, all the spectators and also all the presenters. This is our third Google Hangout that the Canadian Energy Literacy Network is doing. We're with the Canada Science and Technology Museum Corporation, and this webinar is part of a series that's held the last Thursday of every month, and it's an opportunity for people with similar interests in energy and education to gather, share ideas, and discuss topics that are of interest to us. The Let's Talk Energy program sees this group of people in this Energy Literacy Network as a great opportunity and tool to work together. We want to help maximize investments in people's work and create a network that we can share resources and expertise and learn from each other. Today's topic is digital tools for education. And the question was, how do you use digital tools to effectively convey your message? What are the best examples of technologies to engage, educate, and entertain audiences? What are some of the best ways to identify and target new audiences? And what are some of the best practices in the field and some pitfalls people should avoid when developing digital education tools? We know that there's a ton of tools out there. We have some presenters today who are from different industries and who have had experience in different elements. We have David Dodd, host and producer of Green Energy Futures, an online multimedia channel. He spent the last 3 years traveling across Canada producing more than 100 videos, radio stories, and blogs about people engaged in clean energy solutions in their homes, businesses, and communities. We also have Stephen McKinnon, who's worked with GreenLearning Canada since 2006, developing e-learning tools and various education projects. He's led the team in developing GreenLearning's Ecards and their Cool 2.0 resource, sharing and collaborative platform, and is a recipient of the Prime Minister's Award for Teaching Excellence. We also have Melanie Hall, who's worked for both Queen's Observatory and the Canada Science and Technology Museum Corporation in science education, both online and on-site. She currently works for the National Outreach Team at the museum to connect, reach, and engage with audiences who are outside of the walls of the museum. And finally, we have Jeremy Kazub, who's an interactive media developer and has done projects for a wide variety of clients, including the Air Force, the nuclear industry, and Open Data Canada. Today, his presentation is going to focus on what makes content interesting and therefore shareable. So without any further ado, we're going to pass the mic over to David, and David is going to start on his experiences with digital learning. Over to you, David.
Great, I'm unmuted now. Thank you very much, Jason. My pleasure to be here. I had the real distinct pleasure of starting a journey about 3 years ago because of some of the work I was doing at the time was on some of the really, really difficult issues with regards to energy, such as oil sands and pipelines and climate change and all that sort of thing. And I really thought what was missing was somebody who was highlighting and validating solutions, green energy solutions, clean technology solutions, that sort of thing. And so I started on a journey. I'm just going to fire up my slideshow here. I can't think and talk at the same time, so it'll just take me a second. I hope I can think and talk, but we'll see here. Here we go. Okay, so say something if you can't see this, because I can't tell what you guys can see anymore. So I started this project about 3 years ago, and again, all my career I've been working on environmental things, environmental education things, and media projects. And so I publish magazines, I've worked for book publishers. I like to say I got to see got to oversee the end of the magazine era, essentially, because it's changed so much with the digital world. And in my business in the old days, you know, if you were a writer, you would write a story and you'd try to get $50 for it, and you'd feel happy if you got $50, and at least you could pay the bills for half of one day. That's not what it's like now, and the digital world has presented us with so many different opportunities. So I'm not sure exactly what's relevant to the education world, but I do know that the resources that we're producing are of interest to them. So hopefully through telling this short story, you'll get some questions, and I'd be happy to answer them when I'm done. So we started this journey, like I said, about 3 years ago, and my motivation was because the media is full of stories, negative stories about energy issues, and it's not that they shouldn't be full of stories, but what I thought was missing was stories about the solutions, stories that helped us understand whether the solutions were real, what potential they had, and how much they could help us transition to a cleaner energy future. So I set out to do stories about those solutions, and essentially I made a proposal that said I would travel across the country and produce video, radio, and blog stories about people engaged with every kind of green energy solution you could think of across the country, from electric cars to solar energy to earth tubes to earth ships, green buildings, you name it, tidal energy. And so luckily, a couple of fossil fuel companies actually agreed with that. So Shell Oil has been a supporter since the very beginning, as has Suncor, and that's why I'm able to focus on the storytelling aspect of this project full time. We spend no time trying to sell our stories. In the beginning, we set up our own web channel, but we were under no delusion that you could just set up a web channel and people would come on the internet. In fact, we knew that was not the case. So we knew we needed a home for our videos and for our podcasts and our blogs, so we created greenenergyfutures.ca. But how we got our audience in the beginning was by reaching out to various venues. So we took a multimedia approach. We do produce videos. We produced more than 100 of them. We use photographs, about 3,000 of them, on Flickr, which have had now over 700,000 views. Each of those photos, for example, has a cut line that tells a little bit of the story and then links back to a story or a video or something like that. We produce a podcast, but again, podcasts about something as earnest as producing energy from waste management, not a big seller on the internet by itself unless you find the audience. So what we did in the beginning was we used those podcasts to broadcast to the CKUA radio network in Alberta to their audience of 100,000, which really helped us get started. So like I said, our blogs in the beginning, we published them to our own site, but we also made deals with newspapers and other websites to also publish our materials, such as the Huffington Post. So in the beginning, our site had no visitors, no likes, no shares, not a lot of attention. Definitely our approach has been to be multimedia. I was very skeptical about the role of videos in the beginning, and indeed in the beginning they had very small numbers of views, but that has really, really grown over time. So I'm sold on videos now, and I think podcasts in the right environment could work, but the way we do them, they're better on radio. And so we are on the CKUA radio network in Alberta. The stories that we do are just about anything that's not fossil fuels or carbon capture and storage. And this is our self-imposed mission to cover these solutions and the people doing these solutions. Who do we talk to and who do we target? They're kind of the same thing. We are targeting entrepreneurs and business people, and we talk to them and highlight their stories. We target and highlight politicians, members of civic administrations, civil servants, that sort of thing, utility heads, project managers, anybody who's involved in this sort of thing, small businessmen who are starting solar businesses and geothermal businesses, all those sorts of things, educators and community leaders. And
David,
so what we've done, sorry, I'm done?
No, I just wanted to say your slides don't seem like they're advancing. Maybe close it down and reopen it, and we might be able to get those advancing. Sorry, Brent, interrupt you.
There you are. Slide? I'll just come back.
There you go. It is advanced now. Thank you.
Thanks for telling me, Jason. Okay, so I'm back. I was just using the beginning of a slideshow to start this. So I think in terms of, my message for you is that really you have to have a compelling story about something that people care about. And what I've learned is, even though these stories are really kind of earnest sometimes, let's face it, they're about stories about farmers taking cow poo and making electricity out of it, which on first blush might not seem like a terribly interesting story, but because we actually went out and found our audiences. We didn't just build it and hope people would come, because we knew they wouldn't. And it's taken us 3 years, but a story we did about 2 or 3 weeks ago had about 3,000 likes and shares on our own website. And a normal news article, a day-to-day normal news article, might have half a dozen. So we've really tried to do something different here, and it was very gratifying last week. I spoke at the Inside Education Conference in Banff to teachers and educators, and had a terrific time with them and a terrific response. So I'm going to stop there, Jason, and hopefully if people want to know more about certain aspects of it, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thanks a lot, David, for that. And that actually brings up a good point. If there's viewers here who are wondering how to ask questions, you have to open up the Q&A function. And you do that by mousing over the top of your screen. You'll see a square box made up of 9 smaller boxes. This is not for the speakers, but for the viewers. And if you click on that, it'll open up the Q&A app on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can just type your questions in there, and the speakers will either try and get to them throughout the presentation or afterwards we'll address them all. So I'll pass the mic now over to Jeremy, and he will be presenting about what he's been doing.
Sure thing. My name is Jeremy. I'm an interactive media developer. Like Jason said, we've done some work with energy partners and with partners who have a message that some people might agree with and some people might not. As David mentioned, having great content is absolutely key. You have to have it, and you can't just build it and hope people come. You have to reach out to audiences and to media partners. I'm going to approach it from the side of social sharing, meaning what is the organic sharing, what is the spontaneous sharing that happens when people actually hit that like button, what compels them to hit the like button, and where do they find your stuff to like it. So I'm just going to put on my slides here. Jason, let me know if they're not going to work. All right, can everybody see that? All right, I get a thumbs up. So this talk is a little bit about the concept of connections. And by making connections, by you drawing connections in your content to things that people care about, you're going to make those connections. You're going to make those likes, those shares. You're going to get the people to notice. So we're going to talk a little bit about the general concept of how you can craft shareable ideas by revealing hidden connections. So it's a little technique we use so that your island of information can reach out to what people experience every day and what they're interested in. So think about the last time you saw something really interesting online. This is from the audience perspective. We're an audience just as much as we're a content producer. Were you specifically looking for it, or did it somehow magically find you? That's the amazing part of the internet. Here's something that recently found me. You can see this graph here of solar energy production in Germany. And you'll notice where that arrow is, there's a huge dip right in the middle of the day. I wasn't expecting to see this. I'm interested in infographic development. That means visualizing data sets. And I was on a talk channel with people who shared out this graph. And they're wondering, what is that big dip right in the middle of the day in German solar power production? Well, it turns out that was the solar eclipse last year. And this concept of the solar eclipse dropping energy production and how the grid compensated for it became big news, not because they had a resilient grid, which is the kind of the backstory of it, but because something as amazing as a solar eclipse did not really impact total production. There weren't blackouts everywhere. So a concept like a flexible grid was made accessible by the fact that the sun itself was blotted out of the sky and power production still stayed stable. That makes a big engineering concept immediately accessible to the average person who's heard about an eclipse. So like the perfect Christmas gift, you never even knew you wanted good content until you had it. When I know what I want, I go to Google, I end up on Wikipedia, click around a bit. But what if I don't even know what to ask? What if I don't know that there's stuff out there that I'm going to be interested in, but I don't know yet? And I'm going to introduce this guy here from about 1979 or so named James Burke. He worked for the BBC. He was a historian and a presenter who actually had a show called Connections. And his job was to draw connections between things like what did old movie film, like this old celluloid, have to do with the modern space station? How could the space station be informed by the technological developments almost 100 years ago of movie film? And that was James' basis of history. He rejected a linear causality in history. Instead, he looked at coincidences and creative lateral thinking to make breakthroughs. And we can do the same with social sharing because those connections are delightful and inspiring and shareable. So the best connections, the best social media that's shareable is surprising and delightful. So in this case, the early talkie movies, the first ones with sound, they encoded the sound right on a visible track on the film right next to the picture. And they used tiny, low-efficiency solar cells to convert those light and dark spots back into sound. Those little tiny sensors eventually became manufacturable and big enough to be used as solar cells on spacecraft and now used on the ground at home. So there's a connection between the solar panel that you might have seen as you drive down the street and these very first technological developments. So here's one that I just came up with last night for fun. How long would you have to pedal a bike to charge your phone? Because I'm biking downtown and I've got a phone that's always out of batteries. Could I hook the two together? How much energy does it take? This opens the whole concept of what is energy and how much energy can be moved around, how it's equivalent or not. If you frame it in a context that people do every day, like charge their phone or pedal a bike, suddenly you're really getting a feel for just how much energy there is in a lithium battery in a phone. Or another one, it was a great day for skating on the canal today. How far could you skate on the power from eating one beaver tail with, say, cinnamon and maple on it? So you're drawing together two concepts, or connecting two concepts that people are familiar with, and you're managing to create a new concept about how much energy there really is in food. That aha moment is what people want to share. It's like a good joke. People like to share a good joke or a good riddle because it gives an aha moment. Another one quickly, just a quiz that I would come up with. How is Canada powered now, or powered 100 years ago? Is it wood, coal, hydro dams? In this, you're not just doing a quiz, but you're actually taking audience feedback and seeing and showing people how they do with respect to the rest of the audience. So they're actually contributing to the data you're collecting. Were they right? Are they right more often than other people? Do they know more? That interactivity is certainly shareable because it's always a bit of a competition. So how do you craft these aha moments, these shareable, delightful moments? Well, the first thing you have to do on the internet, we found, is to be yourself. That means be honest. Don't spin stuff. Don't get it through 8 copywriters. Just stay curious, stay engaged, stay connected to the people around you. Be generous and share, but be focused on your mission. And keep your ear to the ground. Hear what's going on, what the big conferences are, what the small things that are going on are, like, say, the eclipse. You need to do these things because the lateral thinking needed to make these connections require a big, busy playground. This guy is famous. He wrote a book called What If, and it's based on people's ridiculous, absurd questions, and he answered them from a scientific and physics perspective, like what happens when you pitch a baseball at 90% of the speed of light? What would happen to it? Rather than just dismiss that question as impossible, he took on all of these questions in his book and answered them, and in doing so, he really engaged his audience, which were people that just come up with these crazy questions, or like me, for example, or anybody when you're just musing a little bit. And by explaining what would happen in these strange circumstances, he could really bring the science and the explanation back to the audience, rather than having the audience go to the explanation by reading a textbook about aerodynamics of baseballs. So the thing you have to remember with sharing content is that you have big issues that you're discussing, especially in energy, but people have small, daily, insistent, immediate, and seemingly trivial touch points every day that happen to them. And you can engage them at those small, trivial touch points with your big issues by drawing those connections. Another example here is the new Apple Watch. It's 10,000 times as powerful as a calculator watch from the 80s, but it has 0.0001% the battery, or times the battery life. And you think, well, if it's so much more powerful, why hasn't energy storage gotten as good as the technology in the microchips? So here we can open a whole discussion about energy storage, how it impacts the feasibility of renewables. So the other thing to do is be timely. You don't put out the iWatch thing 3 years from now. You don't talk about the eclipse 2 weeks after it happened. With social media, you got to be there when something happens, and you don't just share somebody else's stuff. You add something. So for example, with that eclipse, you could have talked about a resilient energy grid with an infographic. You know eclipse is coming. You can predict them 100 years in the future. You know solar power is out there. So draw those two things together and be ready with your tweet that says, find out how Germany will keep the power going. And hashtag all the lateral thinking concepts, not just Germany, not just energy, but things like eclipse, astronomy, Germany, renewable, and infographic, other tags that people follow. You got to bring those connections back to your message. And from that infographic, people are going to be on your site and start looking around. The other thing is, don't just give facts. People reject facts that don't match their worldview because they're people. If you give them tools to satisfy their own curiosity, they're changing their own minds, which is much more effective. For example, Costa Rica had a 75-day streak of using renewable energy. And a lot of people simply retweeted that as congratulations, Costa Rica. But really, what is and isn't renewable? Is there a dividing line between that? Is there a gray area? Can I categorize that? Is there an opportunity here for you to have a little flow chart of how renewable and non-renewable energy works? How does, say, solar power work, which is what the Energy Department of the US chose to frame this discussion on Twitter as? Here's an interactive graph from the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany. They track the energy output of all their power plants, renewable and non-renewable, every day. You can see the spikes in solar power, the compensation from conventional power plants, and how it all goes together. People can go on this graph, check a week, check a day, remove and add power sources, and see how it works with the interactive. They discover for themselves. They're not just told solar is good, non-renewable isn't as good. This shows explicitly why you have a mix of them all, and they find out for themselves. Finally, be persistent and focused. If you make the greatest tweet in the world, that's fine for today, but what about tomorrow? What about next week? You have to continually show up with good content like a news program. For example, somebody asked recently on Reddit, which is one of the biggest communities on the internet, what is energy anyways, in quotes? Simple question. The discussion went from physics to engineering to philosophy, 2,000 upvotes, and a discussion thread that's still going on right now. And were your experts, could they have been available to add to that discussion, something that very commonly happens in Reddit? They've had astronauts show up from nowhere, for example, to contribute to discussions. Are you available? Is your ear to the ground? Were you ready for that? So we'll finish up with a little content pre-flight checklist. And I'll share this out on with Jason on a blog post later on, just to make sure that your content is shareable ready and it has those connections going. And if you want to read more about this, I'd recommend a book by Daniel Kahneman. He's a Nobel Prize winning psychologist who talks about the human biases in human intuition, or in intuition, and some of the frustrations of getting the facts out to the public. So I'll stop there and I'll pass it on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jeremy. Very interesting stuff. So I'm going to pass it over to Melanie now. Take it away, Melanie.
All right, thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me here, and thanks to our other two presenters and our third later. So my name is Melanie. I work at the Canada Science and Technology Museums Corporation, which is 3 different museums altogether. So we have the Canada Aviation and Space Museum, the Canada Agriculture and Food Museum, as well as the Canada Science and Technology Museum. So sort of our corporation is the umbrella to all 3 of those. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do as an outreach team, as I'm working to get to everywhere in Canada and internationally, I guess, too, as opposed to just in the museum. So this really goes well with getting into classrooms, whether it's you know, at school or with teachers, and how we do that digitally, because Canada's a pretty big country, so we can't drive everywhere or fly everywhere that we'd like to do these types of things. So hopefully some of the different products that we create, as well as some of the lessons learned that we've had to go through. So I'm going to do a little screen share here to get us started. I'm going to double check that I have the right one. I think this is it. So there you go. You can see our 3 different museums on the front page there. Again, we're the corporation. So I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to try to focus on the engagement level of each of our products, because there's a difference between being physically in a classroom with the kids and having to do it online, and sort of you have to gauge what level of engagement you're looking for from what you're going to give them. So I'm going to start with what I think is our most engaging programming, and it's our distance learning programming, and we're actually piloting it this year, and so we have a few programs that we offer. Distance learning is the name that we give to our program, where we use either video conferencing, or we use Google Hangouts, or we use Skype. So we give teachers the option. We try to connect with classes in Canada and eventually the United States. But these programs are geared towards the curriculum. And so this for us was really important in getting to teachers, giving them something that they'll want to do. And so here we have a Simple Machines as a grade 2, for example, in Ontario, at least, in most of the country, curriculum link. And so if you're looking to get into classrooms, I think that the biggest piece of advice, and I think probably many of the people listening today know this, but you have to make those curriculum connections for the teacher, and it has to be obvious. You have to speak their language in order for them to want to take this material into your classroom, into their classroom, not my classroom. And so here's a slide of sort of some of the how we do our distance learning. So we're not very fancy yet. We've got a simple classroom here at the museum that we use. So in one of them, I'm using a webcam on the right there, teaching about the eclipse. So you can see that bright light is the sun, and the styrofoam ball is the moon. And so we teach about that to the kids on the other side. And so we've learned a lot of the time not being physically there with the kids, but still wanting that level of engagement where they can ask you questions, you can give them hands-on demonstrations. A lot of the time it requires a really good communication with the teacher on the other end. So you're not physically there, this is all virtual, but you need to make sure that the classroom management is up to par. And so personally, I'm used to doing these things with physical people and children in front of me, and so this is kind of a learning experience for us. We also learned that you have to be extra animated on camera. And actually, I kind of forgot that when I started this Google Hangout. So you'll see I'll end up being extra animated at the end. But to really capture, you know, the enthusiasm of a classroom when you're not physically there is difficult. And so being extra animated helps, extra enthusiastic. So we have, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but on the picture on the left, we have one of our sort of close-up cameras that we can also use to get the children engaged. And that by far is what we're finding is the best way to get into the classrooms and teach these curriculum connected courses. So we've used, like we're doing now, we've used Google Hangouts. So it wasn't an on-air broadcast, it was a one-on-one chat with the teacher, and generally that's, we found that might be a little bit easier for teachers if they don't have the video conferencing equipment. So it kind of depends on the jurisdiction, what their internet connection is like, and what they're able to download in the school board for the software on their computers. But it worked pretty well. And these programs are modeled after what we usually do in the museum, but they've been adapted for the video conferencing. So that's, I would say, sort of the highest level of engagement. You know, we really get into the classroom, and it's with, you know, 15 to 30 students at once. The other thing that we do are Google Hangouts to a broader public. And so this, and all my examples here that I'm giving aren't necessarily energy related, although I suppose you could relate lots of things back to energy, but just sort of examples of what we do. So we do family hangouts. It's actually tomorrow. We're doing this hangout that I'm showing you on screen. And so it's a live on-air broadcast. It's almost more like a TV show where we try to get audiences to see things that they might not otherwise be able to see even if they come into the museum. And so giving this access to everybody, once you do the Hangout, it goes on to YouTube, and so that also gives us some video offerings. Here's a picture of two of our Hangouts. So again, we try to link to the curriculum if possible. We know that these are for families, but we also know that teachers and homeschoolers really enjoy these types of things. It's a 20-minute thing that we do. There's a little bit of learning at the start, and then there's a craft that they can do or an experiment. So giving them something hands-on to do, and then the broadcast ends. This is a little bit lower engagement because it's not, we're not talking directly to families. It's more of, like I said, a TV show where they can ask questions if they would like to, using the Q&A app or through a Twitter hashtag that we set up. And so we get questions from kids sometimes, but it's kind of like the Google Hangout that we're on now. So we're not physically talking to our audience, but we're able to reach them that way. So a lower level of engagement. This is a photo on the left of our assistant curator, Emily Gann, in the warehouse with our locomotives. So this is our reserve collection, so no one usually sees this back room. And on the right is actually me, and I'm teaching about the difference between Jupiter and Earth and the sizes there. We also create some web videos. So we put these online. I would say this is an even low, so I went from the highest level of engagement in my presentation to the lowest. I didn't want to get cut short on time, but web videos are a really good way to get a message across. But again, the level of engagement is really not as high. You can engage using comments on YouTube or things like that, but for us, it's not really something that we monitor. It's more content that we're putting out there. Maybe we're sharing it through social media, like Jeremy said, we have the social media officers and some public affairs people working to get that message out, but the content is what we really create in education. So on the left is a snapshot from a series of videos we did with Canadian Nuclear Laboratories. They just changed their name. And so that was a series of videos really meant to get into classrooms. So we know that we need to sort of envelop these videos into a more like a curriculum package and ensure that they're getting into classrooms. So whether there's accompanying activities or you know, before and after you watch the video, do these things. I think that's really important. On the right, if you're wondering, is elephant toothpaste experiment that we did in kitchen chemistry. So again, these are shorter, so our videos tend to not be very long because we find that on YouTube especially, the attention span is pretty short. So we try to aim for 3 minutes. Sometimes it's hard to get all of atomic theory into 3 minutes, but we gave it a shot. And so those are on our YouTube channels. And again, we have 3 different YouTube channels for our 3 different museums, and so they all go up there. What's the next thing I want to say? So I would say, I don't want to use the word a low level of engagement, but sort of less feedback for these types of activities. This is called a virtual program, and they're downloadable resources for teachers. So the only way that we track the success of these products is through download rates. We don't get a lot of feedback from the teachers afterwards unless you know, they might ask us some questions about the specific program. But engagement in the classroom is high because there's a lot of activities that they can do. It's a pretty lengthy document, and it's full of curriculum connections for the teacher. But for us, we don't get a whole lot of feedback on that. But we know that you have to regularly update these on your websites. Continue to have new offerings. So we have some offerings that are, hang on a second, sorry, that are less, that are updated more often, so maybe monthly or something like that. Same with the web videos, we try to offer something all the time. And the last thing that I want to say is about teachers. So keeping a dialogue with teachers we found is the most important. I personally don't come from a teaching background. I don't speak teacher as well as teachers do, so they have terminology that we, you know, might not expect. So really being able to talk their language. So for example, I think I have a note here. So if you're creating a teacher workshop and you want to get your teachers engaged to come to you, it shouldn't be called you know, a learning workshop on energy. It should be called professional development, for example, because that's what teachers know what professional development is. So wherever you are in your location, try to chat with teachers and figure that out. So we have, we're very lucky that we've been doing this for quite a while, and we have a really good network of teachers going here. We also have a teacher advisory group, so we rely on a small group of teachers from across Canada to help us with those tricky questions. So if we are trying to test a product or trying to see if something's a good idea, what level of engagement we'll get, that's something that we've relied on in the past, and it's worked very well for us. So I'll leave it there because I'm probably out of time, and yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Melanie. I'm going to pass it over to Stephen now. Stephen's with GreenLearning, and you're up, Stephen.
Okay, thank you, Jason. I can really see some threads, some themes that the viewers are going to be able to see the commonality between our various experiences. GreenLearning Canada, first of all, is a national environmental education organization. Our target is really in the classroom, and our teachers are really our primary target audience. So as with what Melanie said, teachers are really core to everything that we do. We are presenting classroom materials, classroom projects. All of the people in GreenLearning are teachers or former teachers. Teachers design, teachers give us feedback, pilot test everything. So our things are really based in the classroom, and we are very good at sort of keeping things real for the classroom. The reality for teachers, though, our target audience, they are very busy people. They have very little time. As a result, they appreciate our materials, but at the same time, it often feels like our competition is Google. that if a teacher needs a lesson on climate change tomorrow, their first stop might be Google, instead of coming to an environmental education organization. We're also quite mindful of the teachers and where they're at. Some of them are just looking for a worksheet to download and print out and walk into the classroom. Some are willing to do online projects, have computers or iPads in their students' hands every day, all day. Some of them are comfortable with social media, some of them are quite uncomfortable with it. So we have to sort of address all those levels. And we are also very mindful of the student, today's student, what their reality is, how learning styles have evolved. And I'll start to demonstrate some of these points by showing you things that we have done in our various websites. The one I've dropped into here is Ecards. It's an online project where students essentially produce electronic cards that they can send out through email to whoever they want based on a variety of topics there that should show the variety of topics that we've covered. All of these have videos in them. As David said, as Melanie said, videos are very good at engaging people, and in particular young people. So all of these start with short videos. They're all relatable. They're all teenagers who are appearing in them, and they are really just there to engage the student and to basically hook them into what we're talking about. And this particular one is about oil and gas. Also in here, as Jeremy talked about, were graphics, diagrams, those kind of sort of communication channels are really quite critical to keep the students engaged. The Ecards was developed about 6 years ago now. You can see that this is quite text dense, quite lengthy in terms of the information that the student has to digest before they can go and create their eCard. This is one thing that we are getting better at, and in our newer programs we are we're breaking our text up into small pieces that are much more easily digested by the students. We're also aware that these students are not necessarily grown up reading books. A lot of the reading happens on electronic devices, and that their reading styles are really remarkably different, and that they scan for information. They certainly won't start at first and read every word to the end. And so we are piecing it off and formatting it in a way that the critical information really stands out for them. And we are providing it in a sort of just-in-time kind of format, so that just when the student needs to understand the Alberta Energy Review process, that's when that information will be presented to them, as opposed to having to take it all in one go. I'm going to talk about a couple of programs that we don't have. Stop that sharing. We don't have up and running yet. And one of the biggest engagement thing that a lot of teachers will tell you, whether it's online learning or whatever the subject area is, to keep it real. That students, will doze off through all kinds of things that they don't feel are really pertinent to them. But if you take something, if you make it clear that this is for real, then suddenly their engagement level just automatically just jumps right up. The one project that we're in development on right now is based on the oil sands, and in particular the Alberta Energy Review Board, their hearing process. And so we put the students through a simulation, but the simulation is very close to reality. So for example, the students are taking the roles of stakeholders in an oil sands development and have to apply to a review board, and we use the actual statement of concern forms that are used in the in Alberta, and the hearing process, step by step, the agenda is exactly the reality of it. So keeping things real is very important, as is empowering students. I'm just going to jump back to sharing. Ecards is an example of sharing. I'll just jump over to an actual Ecard. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this one, for example, this is an Ecard that has been written on the left panel here, and this is the sending part of it. And so students are empowered. I mean, they can take steps to do something about it. Likewise, in the hearing simulation, the final process of the review is to decide whether to approve or not approve a project, or to approve it with modifications. And though the students in the simulation will take the role of some of the students will be in the role of the board members and will make those decisions. I'm just going to quickly jump ahead to connect. Online material, if it's not well done, can be very static and one way. And as much as possible, we like to build in two-way connections between people, so that this is really most of our projects are about connecting people together and not just people and information. So this is now on the screen within Ecards, where the teacher comments back to the students. And so this student has answered, I don't know whether the highlighting will show up or not, has answered some questions here, and the teacher will give online feedback back to the students. And this has high level engagements, and I've actually, during our pilot testing, witnessed kids running into their classroom to log on to see what comments their teachers have sent back to them. So even though they're used to interacting with the teacher, the novelty or the media of doing it online was appealing to those young people. Another level of connecting people together is back to this particular one. This isn't just an Ecard to anybody, but this was one that was done this fall to send Ecards off to the participants of the COP20 meetings in Peru. So we created a special topic for this, and these particular Ecards, not only were they available online for the students to email to people, but they were taken by Canadian youth delegates to the COP meetings and presented there. So it's a process of connecting the students in the classroom anywhere in Canada to something that is bigger than they are. Another is here. Another connecting to people that we have used in a variety of projects is the Ask the Expert feature. Ecards has it built into it, so if a student is in the middle of preparing an Ecard on Arctic glaciers or on climate change, and they have a question that is not directly answered in the online materials, they can go in here and send a question to an expert. And within 24 hours, there will be an email back to the teacher with the student's answer. I'm just going to show you another version of that. I'm going to drop into Cool, which is our online education community around climate change, sustainability, energy and the environment. This is my teacher space, which has got a lot of stuff going on in it that won't have time to talk about, but just quickly show you we have climate change inquiries going on right now around maple syrup production. This is a Climate Change Where I Live project, and this is the expert from the University of Guelph on maple syrup production, and students right now are tapping maple trees, doing field studies, doing student inquiries, and they will, through this mechanism, have access to an expert. And again, the answers come back in email really quickly. I'm going to talk about just a couple of other engagement Have I stopped the sharing, Jason? The screen shared? Okay. Students like to be part of something bigger. They also like to feel like they are making a difference. One of our other projects focused on greenhouse gases, and we developed a spreadsheet that took actions that students could take individually and on a class basis and allowed them to calculate the greenhouse gas reductions associated with those actions. This is an Excel spreadsheet. We're doing this with grade 10 science classes across Ontario, and so each individual student would enter their pledges, basically, of what they were going to do, and the spreadsheet automatically calculated the greenhouse gas reductions over a 3-month period and a year period. Total those for the whole class, and then we gathered together the 20 or 22 classes across Ontario and did an accumulation of the total greenhouse gases. And there again, we're connecting students together, starting at the individual level and making them part of something that was bigger and giving them a chance to make a difference. Just hopping out now to a quick example of social media. Yeah. Sorry, it's not letting me share the screen I thought I was going to be sharing. Oh, there it is. We have got into using social media. As I said before, teachers are reluctant to do it. School boards, federations, unions have rules about it. But we have started to use it, Twitter in particular, for a variety of reasons. And this is the hashtag for climate change where I live, which is one of our sort of our big project undergoing right now. That maple syrup thing was part of it, and so this was this is the message is under the hashtag, and this was in fact a live time thing where we were doing video conferences with kids across the country, and they were participating through Twitter as the video conference was undergoing. And the last thing I'm going to show you having to do with student engagement is really sort of old school, non-tech kind of stuff. Probably our single biggest seller, if you were to do that, we measure it through Google Analytics in terms of downloads or page views, is from a project called Re-Energy, which is a series of hands-on projects. The one I'm on right now is a hydro generator hands-on projects. So the plans are here, the background information is all here, and students go and make them in their schools, at their homes, in their classrooms. And as I said, this kind of thing is what teachers want to do, what students want to do. The solar oven projects here, we run a solar oven challenge around it as well, where we then bring those classes together. And I'm going to stop now, Jason. I'm well past my 7 minutes.
All right, thank you, Stephen. So we all went over, that's okay. We have a couple of questions there. Maybe we'll address the questions on the side first. So if all the presenters want to take a look, we just lost Jeremy. One of them was, how do you ensure enough content that is really engaging and important to your viewers, and does scheduling tools hinder or help? So I guess it's assessing your audiences. I know that everyone talked about making sure that your audiences were key and at the center, but how do you actually, is it just through looking at analytics of what's the most popular, or is it focus groups like Melanie you're using, or does anyone have another technique?
So I can start there, Jason. So with us, we definitely try to put out regular uploads, and we do plan in advance, and we find that that works very well because, I mean, we don't want to starve or there's an expression, feast or famine. We don't want a feast or famine in our online offerings. So especially with YouTube videos, we find sometimes we put out series. And so the series really has to, people, if they're expecting the next video, it has to come out right away. And same thing with activities. We find that, you know, if someone is willing to come back each month to download these things, they will. And we find that we have a series called Do Try This at Home, and that's sort of for families. They will download them all the time. Personally, we have a team at the corporation. We're super lucky to have them following our Google Analytics and tracking these things. And it seems like what we're doing so far is really good. We're constantly trying to make sure that we have, you know, enough content to go through. We're also lucky in that we have a bunch of different things that we're doing, and so we're constantly engaging with one audience through different means. So whether it's through distance learning or through these online activities. Hopefully that helps.
Anyone else want to chime in there? I was also wondering, there are some questions about attracting audiences. David, you mentioned this at the beginning, so I'll go to you. I know you're low on battery power. And you talked about growing within your own networks. Is that exclusively how you do it, or do you also do things like you know, boosted Facebook posts or Google ads or any other way to draw people in so that they know about your content? All of you have great content, but it's always about attracting those new audiences. There's obviously the organic way, but is there also a way for people who are doing this to be able to build that up quicker than just by friends and family and colleagues at work and kind of make a bigger splash? What's your experience with that?
Hi, it's David here. Yeah, you know, in the beginning, we have done a little bit of Facebook boosting. Facebook messes around with their algorithm so often that I don't like to waste a lot of money there. But we have used a lot of social media for targeting certain groups of people. So in the beginning, for example, we did a video on geothermal. We called it Geothermal 101. And it had very small numbers of viewers. So there's one other lesson here, Jason and folks, over time, is that if it is that content and that good content, it lives a long time and people discover it over time. And as you generate more content that they trust or they like, they realize you have this other content. And I think someone else alluded to this in the presentation, don't underestimate Google searches. So you want to be at the other end of those if you can. And so by calling a video Geothermal 101, it's actually not a bad idea. We've learned over the years that things like, if you really want a headline, if you want people in renewable energy if you want people interested in renewable energy to find you, just mention the word solar, Germany, and first. And that's it. It doesn't matter what you have after that, because you'll get people's attention. We have, one other thing I would say about getting audiences is it's a slow build. You do need the content. It's content over time, and I would definitely try to be interesting and use all the devices we've heard about today. But one of the things I did that was I didn't think would produce anything was I started messing around with LinkedIn about 3 years ago. And because we have content that appeals to people in sustainability and in civic administrations and companies, that sort of thing, LinkedIn actually turned out to be not a bad place for that. I have a personal audience of about 2,000 there, and they're all specialized in this area. So you have a small, high-quality audience there, and then we have a very large, diffuse audience on radio. So, you know, I think our answer to the question is do your content well, build a reputation for it over time, and just keep plodding away. Like, we haven't done a lot of paid advertising. We placed our articles in the media, and that certainly helps. We do television appearances, that helps. Every little thing helps.
Great. Does anybody else have anything else they want to add to that?
Sure, Jason. Oh, I'll let you go ahead, Stephen.
Well, Jason, I was just going to say that a lot of our work is bringing people in is through the old-fashioned organic way. Because we're targeting teachers, we're going to professional conferences, we're working with school boards, school districts, we're working with provincial ministries, and a also working with a large number of partners. Practically everything we do involves partners of one kind or another. So for what we do, it really is a person-to-person build.
Interesting. And how about you, Melanie? You were about to chime in?
Yeah, I think we found the same thing. So going to conferences, engaging one-on-one with teachers, showing them what you have, because they might not, have the time to check it themselves. But personally, when I am doing astronomy education, I find that the serendipity of things like eclipses, like Jeremy mentioned, works very well, because you can be sure that people are going to be Googling that particular phrase on that day. So being sure that you're ready for these, time-appropriate activities. In astronomy, we can often predict them in advance, so that's nice for us. Other things you can't, but being ready to put something out at that time, or if you already have content that touches on something that's happening in the media right away, just knowing not early. I think I'm channeling Jeremy here because he's not around. Making those connections as much as possible and not having to do the work yourself. I mean, I can't create an eclipse, but I can capitalize on it once it's here.
Thank you, everyone. There's a question here at the top. How do you motivate or engage people when you request them to volunteer their time towards any of our events? So if that's participating in a hangout, or doing a try this at home, or doing one of their school programs, or watching a video. So I would expect that it's through great content, but have you found any other kind of surefire ways?
If you're trying to motivate a younger audience, I find pizza works well. So teenagers, honestly, free food is sometimes, it depends on what your event is. If you're looking to have a youth advisory group, bring pizza. I mean, it's knowing your audience, I think, and what motivates them. So, I mean, you're talking about events here in this question, so we do run on-site live events. And again, like you said, Jason, it's often the content that will bring them in, and that's what we a free pizza never hurt anyone.
Perfect. Anyone else?
For us, in putting stuff in front of teachers, we want to make it absolutely clear that this is good content, of course, but it's also linked to their curriculum, and that it is clearly exactly what they probably will want to be doing, and making their life easier. So it's a complete package with evaluation rubrics and things like that.
Perfect, thanks. David, do you want to add anything to that, or?
No, not really. No, not really.
Okay.
I'm down to 4%, by the way.
Okay.
I was just trying to make this thing work on my phone.
It's okay. We're going to wrap this up. There is actually one last question here. Kind of any parting advice you'd give to educators who are new to energy education? What are the biggest challenges, and how to deal with those? So if anyone has any kind of parting words for maybe somebody who's new to this field, that'd be great.
Yeah, Jason, we see this quite a bit. One of the big factors that play someone coming new to energy education is just the fact that they have an inferiority complex. They feel like they don't know enough. Most teachers like to have all the answers already before they embark on things. With energy education, there's just so much. We're working on an oil science project right now. There's just so much that you need to know and understand. So finding a resource that gives you a comfort level, so you can say, okay, yeah, this is sort of information about oil sands that I can present to my classroom. So just getting over that hump, and I guess as an experienced teacher, my advice to any teacher is not to be afraid to jump in. Like, there's so much out there that it's almost like you can't go wrong. If you're doing environmental energy education in the classroom, you're doing the right thing.
The same advice for the teachers as the students. No question is a bad question, probably.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, David, you probably have 2%. Why don't we flip to you and see if you have anything to.
I lost. I don't know. Nod your head if you can hear me, Jason. Okay, because I lost the sound to you for some reason. It's just skipping out a little bit. You know what? It's funny because we don't produce materials that are directly for teachers. We know they're good for teachers because we've been told that. But I've been in a grade 5 classroom, for example, in Alberta, where I think they were doing, it was something called the energy diet. And when I looked at that program, I thought, well, how's that going to work, and where's that going to take the kids? But I went to Chestermere School, and the kids had been using my videos because I cleverly called them like geothermal 101 and biomass, that sort of thing. And so they easily found them on the internet. And the task was for them to evaluate all the different forms of energy. And it was just a very simple task. Evaluate all the forms of energy and tell us what you think. And they had to do little poster boards, and they had a big school open house, and they had to explain what they learned about all these forms of energy. I was absolutely stunned at what grade 5s determined. Yeah, they made some mistakes, but mostly they were smarter than most of us. And so, I think it's worth remembering that, like this doesn't have to be rocket science. And because there are such great materials and there's such great help with things like GreenLearning and some of the other stuff out there, it's not that hard to get into. So we have to help teachers not feel like they have to be nuclear scientists to get into this, I think.
Yeah, I think your point also, there's a lot of resources out there, so not reinventing the wheel is important. Melanie, I'm going to give you the last word, and I see also your comment about pizza was well appreciated, and then we'll wrap this up. So
I would say that for people in the industry trying to get into that education side, that knowing the level of engagement that you're looking for and really basing the format that you're going to put it on based on that level of engagement. So I'm saying like distance learning. For us, it's great, and we get to talk to the kids, but it's really it's not an easy thing to do. There's a bunch of stuff. It's not a low-hanging fruit for many people, but it's a high level of engagement. So judge the level of engagement that you want, either whether it's Twitter or something in person, and then make your decision. So don't try to, because you have to have a distance learning program, do it. Try to fit your audience with that level of engagement. I would say, not the other way around.
I think that's excellent advice, is looking at the tools and your outcomes, because all the different tools have different purposes or reasons to use them. So we're going to leave it there. We're after 2. Thank you, everyone who joined us. Our next Google Hangout will be April 30th. We're going to be talking energy literacy surveys, I believe, with Student Energy and some other researchers, and what they can tell us about what's going on in the public zeitgeist around energy. So we'll be sending out invites to everybody here, and stay tuned for more information. If you do want to find out more about it, please contact me or any of the other presenters here. You can reach them through myself, and you will find my contact information on our website, letstalkenergy.ca. Thanks, everyone, for participating. That was great.